Hello F11 members and welcome to the post-production video tutorials for issue 93, October 2019. So on the screen here we have a picture that I shot for the September edition of the F11 photography magazine, Weymouth Harbour at sunrise, and this was the picture that I ended up with. Had to wait for the light a bit and the right boats, but it all came together nicely. Now I know shooting into the light, shooting into a rising or setting sun, as I was doing here, is tricky because it's a high contrast situation, and retaining the detail and drama in the sky whilst at the same time good detail in the foreground is not easy. What I did was actually there and then I shot with a 0.6 ND graduated filter on the front of my lens to hold back the sky to balance the exposure. Needless to say, I had contrast problems exposing to retain as much of the highlights in that bright backlit sky as well as the dark shadows here in the shadows in the foreground. And actually if I go into the develop module, let's look at the picture before and after, and there you can see this is the image straight out of the camera and the one on the right, which I've finished processing on. And you can see the sky is obviously got much more drama and information on the right, but also key areas of the image have better tonal ranges. For example, this area on the left, I've tamed somewhat the flare in this area of the picture. The area on the right as well, I've brightened up as well, and actually I've brightened the boat up here just a touch as well, whilst pulling back this area of the water to optimize the reflections and those wonderful shapes of the ripples in the water there, which is so key to the composition. So lots of little tweaks, and I was determined actually when I was shooting this picture to do it just by capturing one frame. I think I knew with the moving objects in the picture, such as the boats, doing an exposure merging would be tricky. So really I determined to do it all in one frame. And what's more, rather than using both Lightroom and Photoshop, because I know a lot of you are quite wary of the complexities of Photoshop, I resolved to do all the post-production in Lightroom, and that's what we're going to go through now. So this picture actually took a lot more work than most images do when I work on pictures. Often it's just the work of a few minutes. This one was a little bit more complex, and that's because it's as I mentioned before, shooting into the light is always tricky. I could process this picture using exposure merging so that I had detail in the brightest part of the sun and in the darkest part of the shadows. But I think pictures like that look distinctly unrealistic. So as I said, I'm quite worried. I'm quite happy to lose a few highlights here in the brightest area of the sky in the process of working towards a believable looking picture. Right, so let's start working through it. And what I'm going to do is just go to reset here. And this is the image straight out the camera. And I'm just going to apply my user presets that just a touch of vibrance there and a bit of chromatic aberration correction going on there, which I do to all pictures. And now I'm looking at this picture and I determined to shoot it with a 16:9 aspect ratio format because, well, I quite like that aspect ratio. It works for this picture because I think a slightly wider letterbox image works well. So I'm going to just do that by going to my crop tool and making sure the key on the right is unlocked and coming down here to 16:9 aspect ratio, and then I can fine tune by moving that up and down to select just how much sky and how much water I want. The water's quite important to me because of these wonderful shapes here. And we've got some lovely tones in the sky as well. So I'm just going to crop it just like that. I think that's a nice balance there. But as you can see, there's a little bit of this sign intruding on the bottom edge of the frame. But we'll deal with that later. So I'll click on Done now. And now let's start working through the processing. And I just want to introduce you to one aspect of Lightroom that maybe we haven't talked about before in the Develop module. Here you can see this tab here called Auto. Now if I just click on Auto, Lightroom applies what it thinks is the best settings. Now how those are determined, well, who can say? But I think it's often quite interesting. There's no harm in just clicking on that and seeing what the auto settings have done to the picture. And certainly a lot better than the raw image straight out the camera. So that's interesting, but I'm not going to use it because I'm looking at that picture and I think it's crashed quite a few of the blacks. I'm losing detail in key areas of the shadows here. There's more impact to the picture, yes, but I think we can tease out much better tonal ranges in various parts of the picture by doing it manually. So I'm going to come back on that, just take that back out, and we're going to start here. So first thing to do is look at the blacks and the whites as always, and we have high contrast situation, clipping of shadows and highlights. Clippings shown here with the blacks here, this blue area here. And if I just want to see where I'm clipping better, I can hold down the Alt key and just start moving the black slider to the left. Can you see those yellow marks there, just in the darkest parts of the picture down here and over here, clipping a few shadows? We don't want any clipping really in a picture, but there's actually, just a few blacks, just a few rich blacks is not the end of the world. So rather than moving the black slider, because I can't put in information that isn't there, but what I can do is just try and pull back some of the detail in the darkest shadows. And I'm going to do that and come up to about 46, just a little bit more, 47 on the shadows slider there. And I'm going to look at my highlights as well. I know I'm clipping highlights here. If I hold my cursor over that arrow up there on the right hand side of the histogram, it shows me where. Well, I know that's around the rising sun. I can attempt to pull back a few, and if I come back to about -50 on my highlights, that's pulled back some of the highlights. Be careful of trying to recover highlights that are not there. You can go too far and you just end up with a muddy grey tone where it looks far better burnt out or white. So that's about right there. So now let's see what we need to do next. Well, a few key things, but the first thing that draws my attention is this area in the distance, down the harbour. There's a flare causing a lack of contrast in that area. It's all part of the shot, of course, but there are things we can do to just pull that back a bit. So I'm going to use the adjustment brush here. Click on the adjustment brush, that tool there. Now what I want to do is just come down here and make sure auto mask is ticked, and also click on show selected mask overlay, and now adjust my brush size I'm using my graphics tablet, but you can use the square bracket on the keyboard if you don't if it's easier. And now what I'm doing is we've done this before, but we'll do it again. So what I'm doing, where you can see it's painting red, is actually it's just selecting the area that I want to make an adjustment to. And it's this area here which has been adversely affected by a bit of flare, causing a lack of clarity, a lack of contrast. Okay, so I've selected that area, And with auto mask, it's picking up the hard edge there, so that's good. So come on to click off the mask overlay now. And then what I do is just deal with that flare by adding a touch here of, where's it gone? Clarity. Go the right way. Can you see? It's having quite an effect. I'm going to go to about plus 30, a bit more actually, on the clarity. And I'm going to pull back the exposure. No, I'm not. I'm going to my blacks here, because there's no blacks in that area because of the flare. So I'm going to pull back the blacks there. And that's done quite a bit. Can you see the effect that's having? Really dealing with that flare quite nicely. And now I'm just going to pull back the exposure on that area just a hint. Too much. There, come down on it. Going the wrong way. About -7. And that's done. Okay, a subtle adjustment that, but it's all part of the game. Now what I'm going to do is look at this area of the picture here on the left. I think that's a little bit dark, so I'm going to brighten it up, and again I'm going to use the adjustment brush. Again I'm going to adjust my brush size, and I'm going to click Show Selected Mask Overlay. You can hit O on the keyboard, by the way, it does the same thing. And just paint in this area that I want to make adjustments to. It's this blue building on the right, and these boats here, this dark area and their shadows just down here. Okay. Come down a bit, take it to about there. Good, good. Okay. Click off the mask overlay indicator, and now what I want to do here is take my whites and boost the whites in that area. Okay, again, subtle adjustment, but all part of bringing out the best of the picture. Add a little bit of exposure. Not too much, always keep it subtle. So about plus 20 there. And yeah, I'd say that's good. Click on Done. Right, what's next? Okay, so this area of the water here. There's some great shapes in the wake of the boats, the ripples in the water. So again, I'm going to use the adjustment brush, a very powerful tool in Lightroom. Again, I'm going to click on Show Selected Mask Overlay. Again, making sure Auto Mask is set, and now I'm just going to paint in the area that I want to darken down here. And sort of comes down to around about there. I'm not being very precise, you can, but because the edge is feathered, this over here, can you see I've got feather 100? It makes for a soft edge to my selection. That's key. I should have talked you through those settings actually. So make sure this is the size which I've adjusted using my graphics tablet, and this is the feathering, which is at maximum, which is making for a very, very soft edge. And the flow, well, we'll come to flow in a minute actually. I'll come back to that, but for the minute it's just set to maximum. And now what I'm going to do now is I've just overdone it a bit here, so if I go to erase, and now I can just erase back that mask overlay there where I've gone too far, and there. And now let's have a look. Click off there and come again. I'm going to look at my blacks here, pull them back, and just see how that's putting that a bit of contrast into that area of the picture, really quite subtly. And you can't see any edge to that selection. That's worked well. I'm just going to pull back the exposure on it a bit. That's too much, isn't it? probably to about there, I'd say. Bon. Okay, we're getting there. Click on done, so that's that selection done. Now while I'm at it, I'm going to use the adjustment brush. Again, show selected mask overlay. And now just adjust my brush size here. I just want to darken up the boat a bit. Not darken, brighten this area of the boat. Just a bit. Okay, again, click off, mask overlay, and now just, again, adjust my whites a touch. It just cleans up the whites in that shadowy area there, quite remarkably, and just a hint of an increase of exposure there. A bit more, I think. That's good. Okay, we're getting there, aren't we? Next thing to deal with, click on done. Next thing to deal with is the sky. Now then, I could try and use a grad filter here, but I want to avoid the telltale halo that could result of using a grad filter here. And I want to basically, this is the trickiest thing with pictures when shot in such lighting conditions. You want to dramatize the sky as much as possible, but you can easily end up with a horrible halo effect. But I'll do my best. So we're going to use again the adjustment brush, and again click on show selected mask overlay. Make sure auto mask is set, and now what I'm going to do is paint around the edge here of the skyline, all those chimney pots, and this tree line here. Come right along here. And right round the skyline. And I'm relying on auto mask to pick up these hard edges there. Okay, that's good. Just always bear in mind with this red, it's just showing you the area that's selected. So far, we've not done anything to it. And now I just increase my brush size to really big and paint in the rest of the sky here. Not paint in, select the rest of the sky. That's what I should be saying. Okay, how are we looking? So that's pretty good, isn't it? Right, I think we've gone long enough in this part one. I'm going to have to break off here, otherwise this part will be much too long, and we'll come back in part two and carry on with the processing of this picture. See you there.